Hello, my name is Vega Goose, and welcome to week 2 of Terminator Month. This month we'll be taking a look at all the major Terminator movies, and this week we're taking a look at Terminator 2. Now, Terminator 2 takes a major time jump from Terminator 1. We actually jump to where John Connor is now 10 to 12. I say 10 to 12 because in two separate instances in the series, they've given the age of John Connor at this particular point, and at both times they're inconsistent. So, fuck it, I'm going to split the difference and say he's 11. Anyway, we see that during the course of between the films, that Sarah Connor has actually been locked into a mental hospital, mainly because she told people the world was going to be conquered by Terminators. Now, you would think with the shell of a Terminator literally sitting where she was being rescued from at the end of the first one, that some people might have listened to her, but I'm going to call this the Mass Effect syndrome. They have the evidence, they see it there, but they still dismiss it.
Ah, yes.
Terminator.
The immortal race of sentient starships allegedly waiting in dark space. We have dismissed that claim.
So with that, John has been raised by a foster family and has basically turned into a 90s punk. He rides dirt bikes, he listens to rock and rolls, very stereotypical stuff.
The 90s are like that, man! People like us don't need jobs because we're delightfully quirky!
However, I will say the kid that plays John Connor does do a good job of making a believable performance, and given the out-of-this-world things they have to deal with, that's pretty good for a child actor. Now, with the knowledge Skynet has based off the first film, this time it sends back a new kind of Terminator. A Terminator that was developed in this timeline as opposed to the original. This is a liquid metal Terminator, played by Robert Patrick, who does an impressive job of being a much different kind of Terminator. Whereas Schwarzenegger's Terminator was basically smash and grab, this one is more of an infiltrator, trying to get the information he needs and do things quietly. He also has the ability to transform his body into knives and stabbing weapons, as well as alter his appearance, thus making his job to capture and kill John Connor much easier. Arnold Schwarzenegger returns, this time as a good guy, reprogrammed by the alliance of John Connor in order to protect his younger self. In fact, even though Patrick is much smaller than Schwarzenegger, you do legitimately believe he can beat him when they go toe-to-toe. What I like about this movie is it doesn't have what I call sequel-itis. We don't see a whole lot of the same things repeat each other. Even whenever they do the flash forward, we see that there are major differences from the scene we saw at Terminator 1 and the scene we see now. Linda Hamilton returns as Sarah Connor, and you can see she's definitely a much different character than she was in the first movie, as she spent the time preparing herself to fight, and is now a much different character. She basically has become a female version of Rambo at this point. Now, once John Connor and the Terminator meet each other, the good Terminator I should say, we see immediately that John Connor is able to give him commands. Thus we see him begin to almost humanize as he's interacting with this kid. He becomes less of a Terminator, and it does also explain why he's much less of a brute than he was in the first film. This is a different Terminator who's under different programs. Now in this movie we find out that the root cause for Skynet, at least in this particular timeline, are the pieces of the Terminator left behind from the first movie. And after a very gripping scene in which Sarah Connor is broke out of the mental hospital, we actually end up meeting the person who would go on to create Skynet in this particular timeline. Now, I bring up timelines because another interesting thing about this movie is it actually alters the timeline again. You see, the timeline John Connor version 2 came from, the one who sent Schwarzenegger back to this film, technically no longer exists again because by this Terminator coming back and them changing the events that led to Skynet's creation, it's actually created a third timeline. In fact, an interesting fact, this is where James Cameron wanted the series to end. In fact, he actually filmed an epilogue to the film that shows us many years in the future, and it shows that Judgment Day never happened. And Linda Hamilton is actually watching from the park, and the opening of the movie was being nuked in her vision. Now, as to why there are other movies I'll get to next week, but for right now, let's get to the final verdict. Overall, I give Terminator 2 a 5 out of 5. It is without a doubt the best movie in the series, at least in my opinion. It's a fantastic story from beginning to end, and if this had been the end of the Terminator series, it would have definitely been a satisfying conclusion. Tune in next week when we'll take a look at Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines.